Welcome car fans. Today's video is going to be all about how to install and troubleshoot your car's electrical wiring system, one circuit at a time. Check this out.
Garage time.
Okay, before we dive straight into my car's electrical system, I just want to start by saying this is not the video I'd planned for this week. I had some momentum going on that 912 engine with the cylinder heads, and I'm waiting on some tools, some reamers and some hones for those heads. Instead, I'm going to be working on the brake circuits and things that are going to allow me to drive it around the block as soon as that engine fires up. Brake lights, turn signals, ignition circuit. That's what I'm after today. You know, I'm a little vulnerable here on YouTube. I publish videos once a week showing the actual car progress. Sometimes things don't go according to plan and you have to just keep working on it. So rather than take the week off, I thought let's just work on the electrical. Okay, a huge thanks to Juan Carlos in Texas. He sent me some extra wiring harnesses because my car was missing the rear taillight harness, and some of the harnesses in the trunk area were sun damaged because my car was abandoned outside. It sat outside without a hood for a really long time. So between all this spaghetti, I hope to make one good wiring harness for my car. Hazard is right. There's the engine back there in a trash bag, keeping all the dust out of it, trying to keep it clean. A few videos back, I've already run this wire harness through the car. This is the main harness, goes around the back, and also this side too is in place, just running along the hooks there. Goes underneath the car and down into that hole there. Inside the car, the wires route next to the pedal box there. And these wires are all just loose here. They were just pulled through. I'm going to route these now into the front trunk area so they can attach to the fuse panel. Apparently this is not the right grommet, or at least this one's too brittle and hard to get in. I had a really tough time. I'll have to either get a new one or the correct one. I'm going to leave it out for now, but I'll make a note that we don't want the wires to rub against that sharp metal corner. That's silicone oil. Doesn't really damage the rubber. Now, I've already taken a picture of some of these wire locations, but I don't assume any of this is correct. Who knows the history of this car? And ultimately, I'm probably going to upgrade to a better fuse block system. But for now, I'm just going to take this apart, clean it up, and just try to get the circuits working. And then I can always upgrade this later to some more modern fuses. So I will be cleaning this up and painting it. But for right now, I'm just going to, mock it up in the car. It's likely to get scratched while I'm working on all the wiring. It's also got a little bit of dings in it, so I'm gonna take care of those real quick. This thing is in actually really nice shape. It just needs to be painted. Now, Porsche did tin the ends of the wires as they go into the fuse block, so that's a good idea to improve the conductivity. But a lot of these have corrosion on them, so these need to be re-tinned before they get reinstalled in here. But I'm gonna try to clean up these contacts. I'm not gonna spend more than 10 minutes on it. Just agitating this a little bit. This is white vinegar and salt. So this has been just a few minutes. And you can already start to see how shiny it's becoming. I don't know if I've said this recently, I am keeping this on a low budget. I'm actually enjoying that process. Not in a super big hurry, but if I can use original parts and restore them, then that is definitely the way to keep it within budget. There's no reason why, if this is in good condition, it won't work for a while. Okay, I think I made a mistake in putting these in the vinegar. I think it stripped the plating off, but I can always just get new screws or have these plated. Best I could do is put a little bit of dielectric grease on these, keep everything from corroding. The disadvantage of this system is it looks great now, but it's probably going to tarnish pretty quickly, and then the resistance just keeps going up and up and up. This is where it attaches to the batteries. There's these 3 heavy wires that should have terminals looped on them, so it connects right to the battery terminal. So this is what supplies fuse 18, and also there's a connection behind here to fuse 17. So that provides power into the fuse panel. The issue is this wire has been cut. So I need to replace this red wire with something long enough to actually reach the battery. This big wire is going to come through here, and then it's going to loop around and come out that way. So it's easier in this case to replace the entire wire as opposed to splicing it. The other 2 wires supply power right to the ignition switch. Okay, some of you guys laugh at my dirty garage, but I was just able to find this wire in this box labeled electrical wire, and just digging through here I found the exact size wire I need. Okay, I just put a tiny bit of this solder paste. On heavy gauge wires, I just put a little bit on there. So the solder will flow, and this will go right into the fuse block. Okay, and as much as I hate to do it, I'm gonna have to splice these heavy gauge wires to reach the battery. The reason why is these wires go all the way back to this connector right here. This is the one that goes to the ignition switch, and these are molded in solid wire connections, so I can't replace that wire without doing a whole bunch of extra work on this connector. So I'm gonna clean the contacts and then splice it in very carefully. I'm gonna splice it in temporarily now, and then in the future I'm gonna get the correct crimp connectors and some strain relief on these, so these will never fail again. And of course I'm gonna stagger them so they don't short out in the future as well. Okay, now it's time to start putting the wires back into the panel. And like I said in the beginning of the video, I'm only going to do 1 circuit at a time. A little confusing information. There's numbers on this fuse block and they don't correspond with the flow diagram at all. So even though this is 1, 1 is actually on the front of the car. And I had to look at the workshop manual for that. These numbers aren't very helpful. All right, for the brake lights, it's related to fuse number 11. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So I need to find the wires that connect to both sides of this, and that hopefully should allow me to get the brake lights on. Here's how it looks from the back side. I just got 1 more wire that's exposed. I'll do my best not to scratch anything, but this lug right here is one of the main ground points for the fuse panel, and those terminals are part of the harness right here. So it's important to have good grounds, of course, so I need to scratch the paint off on this stud and its washer just below it. Okay, I made this sanding tool. It's just a wooden dowel with some sandpaper there on the end. Doing kind of a combo approach between a hole saw, a small hole saw to really rough out the paint, and then I'm sanding it with 180. Gotta love that epoxy primer. It really does stick well. That's the kind of ground you're supposed to have. Shiny metal. Okay, this is the connector T6F. I've checked it with my multimeter to know that this is the right connector. Now, one of the difficulties I've had with the workshop manual and the current flow diagrams is it doesn't tell you where this plugs into the car. There's 5 holes right here in this under dash area, and it was difficult to find out where the correct place is. You can kind of tell based on how these are laid out, but I had to go look at other people's cars, and Pelican Forums was helpful in at least getting an idea what plugs into which hole. It does matter where it goes because what you plug in on the other side is almost interchangeable. This one has 5 pins, but a 6-pin connector will go in it. Everything else is the same pin out, so you can put the wrong thing in the wrong hole and probably create a lot of trouble. So I determined that it's this far left hole, looking from the camera. That's the one where the circuit that I'm working on goes. So I'm going to get started by putting that in its place and then leave everything else loose. So using a little bit more silicone oil here on the rubber makes it go in a lot easier. All right, that guy's in. This is the main tunnel harness, and this has been all wrapped up when I pulled it through the tunnel. This pull loop on it soldered on. So I'm just gotta find out where all these wires go, or at least the brake light wires go. Okay, I found the red-black wire is this one right here, and I need to connect it to the top of position 12. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. That's this guy right here, so I had it close, it just needs to go one over. According to the diagram, S12 and S11 are connected. Okay, I'm here at my computer and I want to show you how I read this current flow diagram for my car, a 1974 911. And these diagrams are a little bit tricky. They can be helpful. The difficult thing for me is that this diagram doesn't tell you where any of these components are located within the car. All they give you is a legend on the left with all the items, headlight switch, turn signal switch, and then each of those current tracks. So it's a simplified electrically, but physically it's really hard to find some of these components. What I did for my brake lights is I looked in this legend for things called brake lights. So this happens to be M2, M4, right stop, rear light, left stop, rear light. And those tell you where the current flows in tracks 17 and 50 and tracks 13 and 51. So on the bottom are this yellow band. This is all the current tracks, and it's labeled all the way to the right. It continues over to the right. And the way the current works on this, it's like a waterfall. Things on the top are high potential, typically red, right from the battery, 12 volts, and then the current flows downhill, kind of like a waterfall, a lot of analogies with electricity and water, and then it ends up here in the brown wires. The brown wires are all ground. This is where the current ends. So to track the brake system, I looked over onto track 50, which happens to be on this page. So down here, this is track 50, and you look directly up from there. Here's M2, M4, left and rear brake lights. And then I knew the brake wire color was black with the red stripe. And then here's those two connectors, T6B, T6A, are both of those 6-pin round connectors that were in each corner of my engine bay. So then I travel up and I find out there's a switch right here. This is the brake light switch right at the brake pedal area. So I knew to look for the black yellow wire and the green blue wire. That's where the switch connects. So then you keep traveling up and you find out that this green blue wire is supposed to be on the bottom of switch S11. So I know from the symbols that S is a fuse, a rectangle is a fuse, and this happens to be the position S11. That's counting from the front of the car. Then I can tell that it gets connected internally through this thin black line to something neighboring to it. So unfortunately, this is the edge of the diagram. So I have to go to another page to find out what's connected to S11 internally. Black connections are internal connections. And then there's also a red connection going up here, and it's going to continue on to page 53 too, or track 53 too. So I'm going to zoom back out. I'm going to go a few pages over. Here's 53. 53 down here at the bottom, and I'm trying to see what's connected to that area. So here's that black line from the page just to the left of it, and it's connected to S12. S12 is another fuse, and it's a blue fuse this time. I think it's a lower current, but it's getting power from whatever it's connected to, because these two are bridged together on the back like I showed you on the fuse panel. Some of those are bridged together. So if you follow this red-black wire, it gets connected over here to the ignition switch. D, I've looked it up in the legend, happens to be the ignition switch. That's why I knew I need to connect the ignition switch connectors to get this brake light to work. Here's the connector that goes right here on the firewall, T6F. Here's the color of the wire. Here's the size of the wire. This is 2.5 millimeters in square area. So that's how I knew how to track that down. So this multimeter has a continuity tester on it. So when you touch things, it beeps. So S12 and S11 are connected internally to the fuse block. So that's what the diagram said. It just so happens S11 is the one that's going to power the rear brake lights. That power is carried over to S11, and then to the bottom of S11, I need to connect the green-blue to S11. Here it is, green-blue. Okay, I just put an old fuse in there. Fits pretty well. Ends are cleaned off. All right, so there are some bulbs inside, so let me just power them up and see if they turn on. If for testing, I'm just using this RC car battery. This is 12 something volts, so it should work fine. Just don't want to let those two touch. And then touch one of the leads. Oh, that's weird. That's turning the side marker on, which is strange. There is a connection back there. So one of the filaments on this one is out. I think that's the running lights. It's an 1157 bulb. Let me see if I have another one of these bulbs. Okay, I'm back from the store, and this goes here. Okay, that should be the running lights, which I'm seeing on both now, and then brake lights brighter. Okay, there's a little hiccup here. I thought in the box of all the extra harnesses that my friend in Texas sent, we thought that there would be a short harness that goes from the rear body out to the taillights. It's a short little piece, and it's not there, so I'm gonna make a short little pigtail piece temporarily out of that other main harness. And the wires aren't going to be correct, but I can follow the pin and just sort of connect it to that taillight housing to get it to at least turn on. So he's going to send me those next week, hopefully Fingers crossed. Thanks again, JC. I really appreciate it. And it's coming out of that portion there right into, this happens to be an all black wire, and then it's connected right back here to the back of the light, right there where I know it's the brake light. And then the housing is just grounded here right to the body. There's just right where it screws into the body, I have it grounded. Okay, then down here next to the brake pedal, there's these two wires, black, yellow, and green, blue. Green, blue is the one I connected up to the fuse panel. And then, so this is attached to the brake switch, which is part of the pedal cluster. So when these two make contact with each other, the brake lights should turn on. Okay, before I connect the battery to these positive leads, I want to ensure that there's not a short circuit. There's only really one circuit connected. It's unlikely that there's a short, but you never want to connect power to something that's shorted out. Okay, that's an open circuit. That's an open circuit. That's an open circuit. It's good in this key position. I'm going to move the key to all the positions and make sure there's no shorts at all. Okay, I'm still using the small battery, which is plenty powerful. This can do 30 amps plus. Okay, so it's now powered. I need to go inside, turn the key, and then touch those two brake pedal contacts. First step here is to just turn the key. Okay, that should be the on position. And then the next step is to touch these two together. Oh, look at that. First try. Brake light. That is awesome. Now I'm going to try in a couple different key positions. I think this is accessory mode. No brake lights there. And then this is in the full off mode. Yeah, nothing. So back to on or run. Boom. That makes me happy. The next circuit I want to check out is going to be the ignition circuit. Because when that engine's finished, I want to turn the key, go around the block. And the only circuits I really need are an ignition circuit and like a brake circuit with some turn signals. This guy right here happens to be the ignition coil. So I traced it backwards using the red wire through a connector. This is the engine wire harness connecting to probably the rear fuse panel, which I've taken out. Here's that 14-pin connector, which is part of that rear fuse panel. I don't even have that, but I do have this red wire that goes through the tunnel. So if you follow it around, it's going to go off the page again, and it goes off the page right at about track 66. So I go to 65, traveling along, it goes off the page again at 53. So I need to go back to something less than 50. Yep, 52. So here it is, the third wire from the top, and it's continuing down to the top of S11. Today's session has been a good one. Not a huge milestone, but there's something really satisfying about turning the key and seeing things happen. I realize that I'm missing a lot more parts, so I've created a list. I need the battery cable clamp. I need the turn signal actual switch. I need a headlight switch. I need the emergency flasher, the turn signal device that causes it to blink. So there's definitely a few things I'm going to need before I can really drive the car safely, but that's for another day. If you haven't already seen the video with me repairing the tunnel harness and pulling it through the tunnel, I'm going to put those videos at the end of this one. So if you have time, please watch that, and we'll see you next week. Hopefully be working on the engine.